I'll read the audience here. Good afternoon and Happy New Year. This is the public review session of the New York City Planning Commission. Today is Tuesday, January 2nd, 2018, and the time is 1:05. A quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is a certification for a zoning map and zoning text amendments in Brooklyn Community District 2. Daphne Lundy of the Brooklyn office is here to present.
Good afternoon, Commission. Happy New Year. This is a private application by MDG Design and Construction, LLC, to rezone area to an R8A and R8A C24 district adjacent to the special downtown Brooklyn district, and zoning text amendments to facilitate a new 13-story, approximately 85,900 square foot, 100% affordable mixed-use development at 142-150 South Portland Avenue in Fort Greene Community District 2. The development site is owned by the Hanson Place Seventh-day Adventist Church, a local service-providing house of worship established in 1958. The proposed project would include space for the church service programs and ministry. The surrounding blocks are split between Fort Greene to the north, east, and south, and downtown Brooklyn to the west. The Fort Greene area is primarily residential, consisting of 3 to 5 story row houses, medium-density apartment buildings, and local retail and community facility uses. Downtown Brooklyn, the city's third largest central business district, is developed with a mix of medium to high density commercial, community facility, and residential uses. The area is well served by transit, including access to the BQD and R234 subway lines and the Long Island Railroad Atlantic Terminal. The project area is flanked by Fulton Street, a mixed-use corridor 1 block north, and Atlantic Avenue, a major thoroughfare 1 block south. The historic 30-acre Fort Greene Park is 2 blocks to the north of the site, and South Oxford Park and Collier Girl Park are 2 blocks to the east of the site. The surrounding area reflects the convergence of Fort Greene and downtown Brooklyn neighborhood. To the north of the development site is a cluster of office and residential buildings, including the 13-story Shirley Chisholm State Office Building, a 15-story residential building, and a series of 3 to 5 story row houses. Immediately east on South Portland is the 1-story Hanson Place Seventh-day Adventist Church, as well as a series of 3-story row houses and a parking lot that is used by the church. To the south of the development site, on South Elliott Place, are 2 15-story residential buildings and a portion of Atlantic Center. Finally, to the west of the development site is the Atlantic Terminal Transit Hub and Office Complex. The proposed rezoning area is located on the northern portion of Block 2003, bounded by Hanson Place to the north, South Portland to the east, Academy Place to the south, and South Elliott Place to the west. The rezoning area includes an 8-story office building on the northeast corner, a 12-story community facility building on the northwest corner. The development site fronts on South Portland Avenue. In 2001, the Special Downtown Brooklyn District was created to bolster downtown Brooklyn's role as one of the major central business districts in the city. The district, which includes Atlantic Terminal, created special height, setback, and use controls to facilitate the development of modern commercial buildings. The district was rezoned in 2004 as part of the Downtown Brooklyn Plan to facilitate the continued growth of commercial, residential, and academic, as well as cultural uses. The district was mapped primarily with high-density commercial zoning districts, which allow for a mix of commercial, residential, and community facility uses up to 12 FAR. In 2007, the project area was rezoned from R6 to R7A zoning district as a part of the Fort Greene-Clinton Hill rezoning. The 9-9 block rezoning sought to facilitate the preservation of the brownstone character of the neighborhood while mapping medium-density contextual districts and voluntary inclusionary housing designated areas along portions of Fulton Street, Myrtle Avenue, as well as the proposed project area. The rezoning changed all or portions of the 9-9 blocks from R6, R7-1, R7-2, and M11 districts to contextual R5B, R6B, R6A, and R7A districts. The rezoning area includes an 8-story office building that contains the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Arts on the ground floor, a 12-story community facility building owned by the Salvation Army, and several unimproved vacant lots. The church owns several properties in the surrounding area, including the LPC Landmark Sanctuary Building, located on the corner of Hanson Place and South Portland Avenue, and additional community facility space and parking space. The development site is 12,000 square feet and is mapped with its R7A zoning district. R7A is a medium-density contextual residential district that has a maximum FAR of 4.6 with VIH and a maximum height of 95 feet. The development site contains a 3-story community facility building owned and operated by the Hanson Place Seventh-day Adventist Church. The private applicant is proposing to build a new 13-story, approximately 85,900 square foot mixed-use development with a total FAR of 7.17. The project would include space for the Hanson Place Seventh-day Adventist Church programs and ministry on the ground floor, additional community facility and medical office space in the cellar, and 100% affordable residential units on the upper floors. The building would have a maximum height of 129 feet on the northern portion of the building and would step down to 90 feet on the southern portion of the building. In addition, the applicant is proposing to designate a mandatory inclusionary housing area with option 1 and option 2, and is selecting option 2 for the development site, which would require approximately 20,100 square feet of affordable housing floor area at an average AMI of 80%. The project is intended to be developed under the HPD Mixed Middle Income Program. Pursuant to the program, the residential units would be 100% affordable, and an additional 15% of the units would be permanently affordable. In order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant is proposing a zoning map amendment and 3 zoning text amendments. The applicant is proposing to rezone the existing R7A district to an R8A district with a C24 overlay along Hanson Place. The R8A district is a contextual high-density residential district with a maximum FAR 7.2 with MIH. The district has a maximum base height of up to 105 feet and a maximum height of 145 feet with qualifying ground floors. The proposed C24 commercial overlay would be mapped to a depth of 100 feet from Hanson Place, a primarily commercial corridor and connector to Flatbush Avenue and Atlantic Avenue. The applicant is also requesting to extend the special downtown Brooklyn district over the rezoning area as shown here. In addition, the applicant is requesting a text amendment to the height and setback regulations within the special downtown Brooklyn district to impose a 95 feet height limitation for R8A districts within 25 feet of an R7A district on buildings or on portions of buildings that front on South Portland. This would facilitate the step down of the building to the R7A district, which has a maximum height of 95 feet, as shown here. Finally, the applicant is requesting to designate the proposed project area as a mandatory inclusionary housing area with option 1 and option 2, and is selecting option 2 for the development site, which requires 30% affordable housing floor area with an average AMI of 80%. In conclusion, these actions would facilitate a new 85,900 square foot 100% affordable mixed-use development at 142-150 South Portland Avenue. And I'll be happy to take questions.
Questions or comments from the commission? And for the first comment of 2018, Commissioner Delos.
Couldn't let the moment go by. Happy New Year to everybody. 2 questions. One, I believe there are services that are currently provided on site. Is there a plan to temporarily relocate them during construction?
I could look into that. I'll reach out to that.
When it comes back, in fact, that'd be helpful. And then when it comes back, also, it'd be helpful to know the rationale for choosing option 2 versus option 1.
Okay.
Thanks.
Other comments or questions? Commissioner Levin.
Just a little comment, Daphne. I really like the design presentation in the PDF. There's some, the color coding and the way you laid out the pages is really very appealing. And a step of clarity, yeah. The colored dots on the map and the boundaries around the photos is really great.
Others? Okay, so this application is certified. Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you.
Item number 2, the East 33rd Street rezoning is being laid over. Item number 3 on the agenda, page number 95, is a certification for a daycare center and senior center acquisition in Bronx Community District 5. Our presenter is Manny Lagares, the Bronx office.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. Before I begin, this is one of the centers that, for lease renewals that was in the process before the urban design guidelines were established. Okay, and
And the one other thing that I will note is that we have 3 of them coming up in the Bronx, and it'll get better.
Okay, the name of the center is the Lutheran Social Services of New York Early Life Center and the Bronxworks Senior Center, located in Community District Number 5. The applicant is the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services, the Administration for Child Services, and Department for the Aged. The action being requested is the acquisition to facilitate a lease renewal for a term to be determined for continued use of the Child Care Center and the Senior Center. This building is privately owned, located at 80 East 181st Street, Borough of the Bronx. The last action approved by the Commission back November 16, 1994 was the approval of a 20-year lease. The site is located in the West Concord section of Bronx Community District Number 5. The site is located in the center, is hatched and in red. 3-story building adjacent to a public school, across the street from a park, cat-a-corner to another school. It's located within an R8 zoning district, and you have residential ranging in height from 2 stories to 6 stories. Here you see the 3-story building, approximately 47,000 square feet, in context with the surrounding area. If you look to the east, to the right, you have the Grand Concourse, which is a major Bronx thoroughfare, and there is access to the D train at 182nd, 183rd Street. If you look to the west, on the left, you have the number 4 subway line with a stop at Burnside Avenue. And along 181st Street, you do have several bus lines that travel through the area. Again, this is the 3-story building, which includes a cellar and 2 rooftop play areas. This slide is of the common, which is shared by both the seniors and the child care center. The senior center will be to the right, the yellow doors, and the children that you see here are returning from a fire drill, and they're going to be using this staircase going up. And I just have this additional photograph because on the left, you also have an elevator, which is shared by both the senior center and the child care center. The child care center, as of December 26th of 2017, has an enrollment of 121 preschoolers, and they're having their snack now, but ACS provides a nutritious and well-balanced breakfast and lunch in addition to that. The child care center is located on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the facility. You have 9 classrooms there. You have staff lounge, offices, and you have a kitchen. The parents, let me just go back to that slide. The parents pick up the children. They drop them off, since the center's open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They drop them off in the morning and return to pick them up. This slide is of one of the 2 rooftop play areas. It looks good, but it's unsafe, and it's going to be repaired. And in lieu of that, they use this playground, which is across the street. You have play equipment as well as benches, and I believe there's a water fountain that I can see from over here. That's what they utilize. Well, basically, that's the portion for the child care center. The senior center is located on the ground floor and cellar space, approximately 10,000 square feet of floor area. And this is one of 2 dining rooms currently being, you can see the bingo board, and they're having a bingo game here. Behind me, I took the photograph, is servicing pantry. The center serves up to, well, approximately 200 seniors in a day. And the seniors see this as a home away from home. for socialization, exercise, and also learning. Also on the first floor, this is the part of the treadmills, the exercise. They also have a common room. In the cellar level, you have the recreation, a pool room. And now that I'm at this slide, I just want to mention one thing here that I left out of my other, for the child care center. On August 3rd, I visited the center 2017 with staff from ACS and the FTA. And it was disclosed to me that there was a broken water main during the summer. And that flooded the basement, damaged the walls and the floors. And there was also an existing mold condition. So we actually went down, we saw, we had some masks on. And I returned November 28th of 2017, and I saw the difference. And the floors were repaired, the walls also, the mold, of course, was removed. And I'll go on to the other portion later. But this is their PC room where they actually have the computers available to the seniors for use of the internet. They also receive training, Excel, Word, etc. And they also use programs that will assist them in the preparation of their taxes and other interests that they may have. Okay, now I want to go back to the child care center. Again, regarding the 2 rooftop play areas, it was disclosed to me by the ACS that the roof is unsafe, and I recall I just mentioned that. And I went back, of course, on the 28th, and the roof still wasn't repaired. However, that's in the pipeline to be completed. Are there any questions?
Yes, Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you, Manny. 2 questions. What is the duration of what I assume is a lease, since it's a privately owned building?
Okay, the old lease or the new lease?
The new lease.
Well, that's to be determined. It could be either a 10-year lease plus up to 20 years.
Or shouldn't we know before we vote?
The agency will have an opportunity at the public hearing. You will ask them these questions. You have representatives from the agencies here, and they'll be prepared with an answer.
Secondly, when should we expect this roof condition to be repaired? Hopefully before we vote.
Well, I hope so too. I don't have an answer for you, but the agencies will make a note of that and have an answer for you.
Commissioner Marin.
Manny, thank you for your presentation.
You're
Commissioner
welcome.
Knuckles actually touched on something that I wanted to question, and that is the roof. You mentioned that the roof is unsafe. That's different from the roof needing repair. What's the unsafeness of that roof?
Aside from that, the roof has leaks. There's also columns that are unpadded. That poses a problem for the children if they're playing up there and they just go into one of these columns. And let me see, I have, right here, you can see that metal
I got it.
up there. Yes.
So there is a breach somewhere in the roof. Is it leaking downstairs, or is this the only condition that's unsafe?
When I went to the site, I noticed that there were water stains on the ceilings, and the staff actually told me that they do have a water leak, and that will be repaired.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Other questions or comments? Okay, the application is certified. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Manny.
The 4th item on the agenda, page number 115, is a referral of a UDAAP designation and project approval in Bronx Community District 3. Michael Cavallaro of the Bronx office is here to present.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Slightly preemptive, good afternoon. Okay, so this this application is for a project at 1490 Southern Boulevard that would facilitate the development of a 10-story building of approximately 75,000 square feet that would include 112 units of affordable independent residences for seniors, as well as about 4,500 square feet of community facility space. The applicant in this case is the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, and as noted, this is a non-ULURP UDAAP designation and project approval. The project is located in Community District 3 in the Bronx, just south of the Cross Bronx Expressway and to the west of the Bronx River. The immediate local context area for orientation, the left side of the screen here is north, is immediately along Southern Boulevard, which is a major north-south thoroughfare. The 2-5 trains, elevated lines, run above Southern Boulevard. There's also the BX19 bus, as well as some other buses running east-west throughout the area. The nearest stop on the train, I should note, just 2 blocks to the north is 174th Street, and then about a block and a half to the south is the Freeman Street stop on, again, the 2 and the 5 trains. Notable open space in the area would include Crotona Park, which is about 127 acres just to the north. There's some smaller park spaces as well, including Rock Garden Park, just to the east of the project, as well as the recently completed Starlight Park along the Bronx River, just to the east of the Sheridan Expressway. Notable developments would, I would just note the Compass Residence project, which will, when complete, is currently already partially complete, but when fully complete will include some 1,300 residences. Immediate context area on the block, just to the north of the project site, is the Center for Urban Community Services, which is a state-run 60-unit supportive housing for seniors. Also, across the street is the Plaza del Castillo project, which includes a pharmacy, as well as the Children's Aid Society Bronx Family Center. And then also notably, just across the street as well from the project is the Casa Boricua Senior Center, which provides a number of services and also acts as a social center in the neighborhood. And I would note that the community facility space in the project would be operated by the Jewish Association for Services for the Aging, which also already runs services within Casa Boricua. Zoning in the area is largely R7-1 in the immediate area, with some C24 overlays. I would note the anomaly of the R12. I should go back quickly here and just point out the famous Charlotte Gardens development, which was largely abandoned and destroyed throughout the 70s, famously visited by Carter in 77 and developed as single-family ranch homes throughout the 1980s. And so it is somewhat of an anomaly in the area. Otherwise, the area consists largely of 2 to 6-story buildings, with a number of larger buildings that have come online in this area immediately to the south in recent years. The surrounding context area, I'd start on the lower left-hand side. This is looking south along Southern Boulevard. There's an existing structure on the site, which is approximately 9,000 square foot structure. It had formerly a house of worship on the ground floor, as well as 4 apartments above. It's been vacant for some time now. On the upper left-hand side is a view looking north. You can see the same building on the right with some of the vacant lots nearby. Just for context, the upper right-hand corner is showing the Center for Urban Community Services just to the north of the project, with the project located roughly in the middle. And then just finally looking across the street towards the project, towards the east. You can see here the difficult geology at the back of the site, which I'll note a little more briefly here. So this is a ground floor plan of the proposed development. Again, you can see the community facility space. I would note that there is no actual residential space on the ground floor. This is a residential entrance space. You can see the proximity of the elevated 2-5 train, which is approximately 23.5 feet away from the building line. And then you can also see in the hatching, again, the difficult geology that exists at the back of the site. The elevations, on the left is the western elevation, showing, again, the community facility space, the residential entrance space, and then the remaining 9 stories of affordable independent residence for seniors area. I would note that after the 7th floor, there is a terrace setback that would serve as a leisure space, recreational space, meeting space for seniors in the building. On the right-hand side is an elevation showing the southern elevation. You can see here at the bottom, again, the significant grade change there, the proximity to the elevated rail line, as well as the terrace space. I would note also that although as an heirs project within 150 feet of an elevated line, the project could go up to potentially 135 feet. This project as designed is shown at 101 feet, although maxed out at the allowable FAR of 5.01 for an heirs facility. Again, the applicant is only requesting, in this case, a UDAAP designation and project approval. The reason no disposition is necessary in this case is that this property, along with 110 other properties, were part of a large unrestricted disposition in 1985. And since that point, the property has not left city ownership, which HPD Council has been able to confirm. You have more information on that exchange in your packets. And then I just follow up and briefly with some rendering. So here's a view looking northeasterly. You can see the terrace space again after the 7th floor. Here's a ground view floor view with the community facility space entrance and the residential entrance here, with the Center for Urban Community Services shown just to the north. And then finally, that 8th floor terrace space that was mentioned. Thank you.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Ortiz?
Hi.
Hi.
I know the community space on the ground floor. I'm wondering if there's any thought given to a potential tenant at that location?
So yes, I apologize, I failed to mention this. So this would be operated by the Jewish Association for Services for the Aging. The tenant would be an intergenerational LGBTQ center in the space.
Okay, so already identified.
Already identified. I would also note that the property, the HPD has identified the developers type A, who would be taking over the development as well. So that's also been cleared up. There's a development team.
Okay. And has the developer given thought to how the ground floor is treated then? And because I imagine those are, there's a certain degree of privacy that that kind of use requires, yet we have guidelines for transparency, and how are they, potentially addressing?
I think that's a very good question. I don't have an answer to that, but I will reach out to the team and make them aware of it as well.
Commissioner Delarue?
On 112 units, do we have a unit breakdown?
Yes, we do. So
Okay.
the units would all be, just find it here. The units in this case would all be 1 and studio bedroom units. The actual breakdown would be, let's see, studios would be 21, 1 bedrooms would be 13. I'm sorry, they've split this up in a funny way. So actually, of the studios, there would be 68 studio units, and then the remainder would be the 1-bedroom units. Of all of these units, approximately a third would be for formerly homeless seniors.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, this application then will get referred out to the community board for 45 days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, the 5th item on the agenda, page number 161 for pre-hearing review, is the Spofford Campus Redevelopment, disposition of city-owned land, zoning map and zoning text amendments, special permits, and an authorization in Bronx Community District 2. Justin Lamorella of the Bronx office is our presenter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commission. This is the pre-hearing for an application that was certified on October 30th, 2017. The proposal is for the redevelopment of the former Spofford campus into a mixed-use development with approximately 740 units of affordable housing in the Bronx. The application is by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, DCAS, the Economic Development Corporation, EDC, and the Peninsula JV Associates, LLC, which is a JV formed by the Mutual Housing Association of New York, Gilbane Development, and Hudson Companies. The proposal is located in the Hunts Point Peninsula within Community District 2 in the Bronx. And Hunts Point, shown here on this map, is known as New York City's food distribution hub. The site is located here within the red, within the residential section of Hunts Point, but the surrounding ring, as you can see on the map, is mostly manufacturing and industrial. Zooming in closer to the site, the block is bound by Spofford Avenue to the south, Tiffany Street to the west, Lafayette Avenue to the north, and Moneta Street to the east. On the block itself, you have the Corpus Christi Monastery, the Julio Caballo Fields, and the Hunts Point Recreation Center. The site itself contains the former Spofford Juvenile Detention Facility, as well as the currently active La Peninsula Head Start. The development team is proposing a live-work mixed-use development consisting of 5 buildings with 738,000 square feet of floor area. This would contain 740 affordable dwelling units with units available to incomes ranging from 30 to 90% of AMI. There would also be 53,000 square feet of commercial and retail uses, 26,000 square feet of community facility uses, and 21,000 square feet of light industrial uses. There would also be 260 parking spaces available below the development, and there would be no less than 52,000 square feet of publicly accessible open space. The development would be constructed in 3 construction schedules. So buildings 1A and 1B would be constructed by 2020, and that's shown right here, these 2 buildings. Building 2A and 2B by 2021, and building 3 by 2024. In the spring of 2017, City Planning and the Public Design Commission worked with the applicant team to ensure a site design that was as open and transparent as possible. In addition, as the site will remain city-owned, this proposal will be subject to the Public Design Commission review. Just to show you some of the renderings, this shows an overhead of the proposed development. This angle shows the east-west connection at Tiffany Street between buildings 1A and 1B. This shows the development at Tiffany Street and Spofford. This is the intersection of Spofford Avenue and Casanova Street, accessing the public plaza. This is the view of the public plaza with uses opening onto it. And this is a view of Oneida Street with the Hunts Point Recreation Center in the foreground here. And just a review of the actions that this project will require. The first is that DCAS is disposing of city-owned property via ground leases to the Land Development Corporation, to the Economic Development Corporation, and then to the developer for a period of 99 years. EDC and the developer are requesting a zoning map amendment to rezone a portion of the development site from an R6 district to an R72 M12 special mixed-use district, MX17. EDC and the developer are also proposing a zoning text amendment with 3 pieces. The first to establish that mixed-use special district, MX17, then to amend Appendix F for MIH with option 1, and to create an additional waiver to the large-scale general development to allow a reduction in loading berth requirements. They are also requesting a special permit for the large-scale general development to allow a waiver for the bulk regulations, including rear yard, minimum distance between buildings, and height and setback regulations. They're also requesting a special permit for the reduction of loading berth requirements. And finally, they are requesting a zoning authorization to exceed the maximum size of a curb cut. The Deputy Mayor of Housing and Economic Development released a notice of completion for the DEIS on October 20th, 2017. They identified potential significant adverse impacts for transportation and traffic and construction noise. The DEIS identified partial mitigation for the transportation and noise impacts. And the potential for additional mitigation measures will be explored between the DEIS and FEIS, and MOIC, the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination, will be present at the public hearing tomorrow to answer any questions about the environmental review. So Community Board 2 held a public hearing on November 13th, and then a vote on November 15th on this project. They voted to recommend approval with conditions, with 23 in favor, 1 abstaining, 2 recused, and 3 against. And those conditions include to commit to the breakdown of units as proposed, a transparent HPD lottery process, and a 50% Community District 2 community preference, to conduct a traffic study, to provide 30-day recording history of video surveillance accessible by NYPD's 41st Precinct, as well as to provide lighting throughout the development, to provide exterior space for murals on the site, to explore hiring unionized workers and paying fair wages, to address gentrification concerns, to provide quality on-site management, to engage in a community benefits agreement, to explore creating a shared use commercial kitchen food incubator, to keep the current Head Start program operator at La Peninsula, to monitor leases of light manufacturing businesses, to explore incorporating senior housing and senior services into the project, and to explore hiring veterans and setting aside housing for veterans. The Bronx Borough President held a public hearing on December 12th and submitted a recommendation to approve on December 19th, 2017. And at certification, several questions were raised by the commission. One was about community engagement. In addition to the required meetings that the development team has attended, they've also engaged in a series of general information workshops throughout the community. They've also presented several times to the Community Board Housing and Land Use Committee. The commission also raised a question about where parking would be located after phase one is completed. The interim parking will be put in place on a vacant lot that is currently paved and fenced in on the future development site. And so the parking will be able to open upon occupancy of phase one and will remain open until the parking garage is completed within phase two. The commission also asked about workforce development within the project. The development team is working with several local partners, including Sustainable South Bronx, Bronxworks, The Point, and Urban Health Plan. And they are also working to provide job opportunities within the construction site to local residents. There are also questions raised about the open space and the design of the site, and the applicant team and design team will be present at the public hearing tomorrow to address more thoroughly that design. In addition, the commission received correspondence from the applicant team, and they'll be able to further explain that tomorrow as well. So in conclusion, these actions would facilitate the development of 740 units of affordable housing and a mixed-use development with light industrial, commercial, new facility uses in the Hunts Point community in the Bronx. Thank you.
Questions from the commission? Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. Well, first, I'd just say generally, I think this is a terrific re-envision of a location historically identified with individuals with problems, should we say. So I think that's good. I just wanted to ask, with regard to in Building 1A, as well as other buildings, but I'll start with Building 1A, where there is light industrial, 42,000 square feet of light industrial, plus a 17,000 square foot television studio plant. I mean, is that food? Do you anticipate a food use there? Because I couldn't quite figure out where the studio came in, except if there was food.
Food
and
Network.
yeah, that kind of thing.
So I believe that currently the development team is working with several partners within the community to identify occupants. But as relating to the food uses, there's currently planned for a brewery, which I think would be related to like beverage production, as well as a catering company and a bakery as well.
With regard to the daycare center, has the city made a determination about their continuing presence of the daycare center and in a possible expansion?
They've not made a decision yet, but the community is asking that La Peninsula continue in the new space as well. And that'll be a decision of ACS and or DOE.
Thank you.
Commissioner Delauze.
When we hear about the green space tomorrow, it'd be helpful to understand how the different phases of construction with the green space coincide.
Noted.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hello.
Quick question for clarification. So, we talk about food production and retail, and it seems like there's a interesting blend of what is light industrial and what we'll have sort of like a retail side. How is that? Which use group prevails, and how do we determine how much light industrial there is versus how much retail there is?
So from my understanding, I think the majority of the use will be light industrial, but there might be a small retail component. I think the development team estimates around less than 1,000 square feet of that would be allocated for the retail component.
But how do we categorize that in order to determine whether those uses, because I think it's a bigger question. Increasingly, I think we're going to be seeing more of this kind of thing, you know, that has a retail veneer, and you know, what is the retail accessory technically considered accessory to the industrial and therefore allowed in what might be considered an industrial area? Or I'm just trying to understand.
Well, retail of a certain size, and this is definitely small enough, is allowed as of right. So DOB could say, this is retail, it's fine, but they could also say that it is accessory. I've seen this both ways. I think that, yeah, and an MX district is even a little looser, is my understanding.
Okay, that's helpful. Then I'm interested, and I guess this is more for the community board. Will they be here?
I know that they were notified about it. I can see who will be attending.
Okay, because it's curious, the request for video surveillance, because I know one of the concerns I raised at certification was just the concerns around safety and visibility into the site, and we know that the terrain makes it difficult to see into the site, and so how will that be addressed? And if in fact, you know, video surveillance, it's the first time I've heard the request to connect it back to the police. You know, are they engaged in this? Have they been notified? Is this part for the course that at times they take on the responsibility associated with reviewing private video surveillance? Is that the case? Okay.
Yes, and Community Board 2 does make this request, I believe, with almost every project that they see.
Okay. And then the CBA, the request for a CBA. I wondered what our policy is with regard to that, and generally, is that a request we hear but are unable to comply with?
It is beyond the purview of the City Planning Commission. Anita is nodding.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Though certainly not beyond the purview of a community board to ask for or for the council to consider.
Absolutely.
Yes, Commissioner Delos.
But I would add, this is a 99-year lease with a large scale. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, belts and suspenders here for the public benefit standpoint.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
The fact that it is a 99-year lease and will remain city-owned seems kind of unusual in large economic development and mixed-use projects that we've seen. Is this a new approach by EDC? Is this turning into government standard, or is it unique to this situation?
No, EDC is increasingly moving towards 99-year leases.
That's great.
Which I think is advisable, given that a life of a
No,
city extends beyond centuries.
It's something that the advocates have been urging us to do on similar projects for a long time, so it's nice to see the message penetrate.
Other questions? Okay, this application will go to a public hearing on Wednesday.
The sixth item on our agenda, page number 219, is a pre-hearing item for a special permit in Manhattan Community District 3. Xinyu Liang is our presenter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This private application was certified on October 16, 2017, and it's coming back for the pre-hearing review. The proposed development site is located at the corner of Allen Street and Grand Street within the Lower East Side of Manhattan Community District 3. The applicant, Grand Street Associates LLC, is seeking a special permit pursuant to zoning resolution section 74711 to modify the use regulations. In 2012, the LPC designated both the proposed development site marked in red dash line and the adjoining site at 65 Orchard Street, the pink building, as historic landmarks. The development site is improved with a 5-story building that rises without setback to the roof level. The building is underbuilt. On the ground floor, the building is currently occupied by retail use as well as residential lobby. On the second, third, and fourth floor are occupied by multiple short-term office use, and on the 5th floor, it is occupied by one legal non-compliance residential unit that has been in place since at least 1965. The proposed development site is situated within the 662G zoning district, a commercial loft district outside of central business district with special regulations governing the conversion of non-residential space to residential use. In 662G district, residential use is not permitted unless the floor area in such building was occupied for residential use prior 1984. The applicant is seeking a 74-711 special permit for only use waivers, including first, to expand the residential lobby on the first floor to add an elevator lobby for ADA accessibility, as the existing building does not have an elevator. The light gray color on the proposed ground floor plan shows the use waiver locations. And second, to convert the office space on the floor second, third, and fourth to residential use. Third, to add a 6th floor addition also to be occupied by residential use. This enlarged portion of this building would contain about 749 square feet of floor area and would increase the height of the building from about 60 feet to 72 feet at the roof level. The source of additional floor area will be from excess unused floor area as the building is currently underbuilt. The actions will result in a total of 8 residential units, an increase of 7 units, about 10,730 square foot from existing 1 legal units on the 5th floor. There will be 2 units each on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor, and the existing 5th floor units will be divided into 2 units, one of which will be a duplex with a 6th floor addition. The commercial, retail, and storage will remain in subcellar, cellar, and ground floor. To facilitate the proposed project, the applicant is seeking a 74-711 special permit to modify the use regulations, which restricts the residential conversion in 662G district. On October 16, 2017, the Department of City Planning certified the application. On November the 8th, 2017, CB3 held a public hearing and voted to approve the applications, 10 in favor, 3 against, and 0 abstaining. On December 28th, 2017, the Manhattan Borough President issued a recommendation to approve the application, but stated that this is now the 3rd such UDAAP application since the MIH tax amendment was adopted in March 2016 that would have fallen under her proposed lower trigger for MIH, and thus it would be possible that this neighborhood, which is seeing rapid development, could have funds for affordable housing. Thank you.
Questions from the commission? Okay, this application will go to a public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay. The following pre-hearing items are daycare center acquisitions. In light of the recent presentation from the Urban Design Division, we ask that the commission keep in mind that these applications are near the end of their process. You will note that some of them have design elements that were discussed by Eric and Julian, and some do not. So the 7th item on our agenda, page number 261, is a pre-hearing for a child care center and senior center acquisition in Queens Community District 12. Stephen Everett is our presenter.
Thank you, Ryan, and good afternoon, commissioners. Happy New Year to you all. The Administration for Children's Services, the Department for the Aging, and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services are seeking the acquisition of an existing building located at 12310 143rd Street in the South Jamaica neighborhood of Queens Community District 12. This would facilitate the continued operation of a child care center and a senior center, both of which have operated at this location since 1971. A previous application was approved by the CPC in December of 1991 with a term of up to 20 years. That lease expired in November of 2013, and the center has been operating on a month-to-month basis since that time. The project area consists of Block 12039, Lot 44, with frontage on Rockaway Boulevard, 143rd Street, and 123rd Avenue. It's located in R5D and R3A zoning districts, and land uses in the surrounding area are primarily residential, with single and 2-family detached homes in the surrounding R3A and R31 districts. The Omega Sci-Fi Early Childhood Education Center and Rockaway Boulevard Senior Center occupy the entire two-story privately owned building, including the cellar and rooftop play area. The building comprises a total of approximately 36,228 square feet, including 29,721 square feet of interior space and 6,507 square feet of rooftop play area. Omega Sci-Fi Early Childhood Education Center, its primary entrance is located on 123rd Avenue, just shown here, and the childcare facility occupies space on the second floor and in the cellar. The center serves up to 82 children and is operated by 15 professional, paraprofessional, and support staff. The second floor of the facility is the primary childcare facility space. It contains 3 classrooms. A typical classroom example is shown here. It also contains children's bathroom facilities and a small library, as well as a commercial-grade kitchen. The cellar level contains multi-purpose educational rooms, as well as a staff kitchenette and a large auditorium space. I'll note here that ACS provided sprinkler information for this facility and the 2 others that we'll talk about today. And although the first and second floors do not have sprinklers installed, the cellar level does, since it's larger multi-purpose rooms that are larger than the classrooms on the above floors. So again, the cellar level is sprinklered. The rooftop play area shown here consists of approximately 6,507 square feet and is accessed by 2 separate staircases used by ACS. The Rockaway Boulevard Senior Center's primary entrance is located on 143rd Street, and the Senior Center occupies space on the first floor for accessibility purposes. As Ryan mentioned, these facilities have been in the process for renewal for some time now, and although the Senior Center entrance is not as welcoming as the daycare center entrance, the scope of work does not include urban design proposed improvements for exterior signage or covered awning for this Senior Center space. The Senior Center space includes administrative offices, a commercial-grade kitchen, as well as a multi-purpose computer lab and game room. And again, to facilitate the continued operation of this space, the applicants seek acquisition of the existing privately owned building. I'll also note that at review session for these facilities, the commission raised questions about the differences between longer-term scope of work issues and short-term maintenance fixes, such as the example of a hypothetical replacement of a broken window. And I can again confirm that I saw no broken windows on any of the facilities that I toured while I was on site. And the agencies assured me that conditions such as that are fixed promptly and are not subject to, they're not contingent on the approved scope of work for any of these facilities. So on October 16th, CPC certified this application. On November 15th, Community Board 12 held a public hearing and voted to approve the application with a vote of 36 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstaining. And on November 30th, the Queensborough president held a public hearing and issued a recommendation to approve this application.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Stephen, can't we at least get a red door or something for a senior? I mean, as someone who is reluctantly becoming a senior, I think I'd appreciate a red door so I'd remember where I have to go. You know, I mean, you look at this and you might forget what this building is. Yeah, it could be any number of things. How about a red door, Stephen? You may not appreciate it now, but one day you will.
I actually think all of us are channeling our late Commissioner Cantor as we looked at that photo and would certainly urge DCAS to take a look at it.
Completely understood, and of course the agencies will be here tomorrow to discuss these issues.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
It's hard to tell from the pictures. Is the child care center ADA accessible? Looks like there's a step up. Is there another way in?
There is a step up, and the building is not. The building does not have an elevator, but show the entrance. There are steps. I don't think the child care facility space is ADA accessible. However, the senior center space
Behind the black door.
Behind the black door, there is a ramp here,
Yep.
and the space is actually connected on the inside. They use separate entrances, but the child care facility space does not occupy the first floor, and again, there's no elevator. So I don't think they are ADA accessible, although they could enter the first floor from the senior center space.
Okay, it'd be nice to know that ACS has, in ACS's sort of reformed, more systematic look at scopes of work, how they have considered the ADA accessibility issue and determined that this configuration remains appropriate. I mean, I realize it's a challenge in some of these older buildings.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so this will go to a public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
The 8th item on our agenda, page number 297, is a pre-hearing for a child care center acquisition in Queens Community District 12, and Stephen is again our presenter.
This time, ACS and DCAS are the applicants seeking an acquisition of an existing building located at 110 15 and 64th Place in the South Jamaica neighborhood of Queens Community District 12. This would again facilitate the continued operation of a child care center. ACS and its predecessor agency, Human Resources Administration, has operated a child care center at this location since 1972. A previous application was approved by the CPC in June of 1994 with a term of up to 20 years, and the existing lease expired in April 2015. Since that time, the center has been operating on a month-to-month basis. The project area consists of Block 10193, Lot 1, with frontage on 164th Place. It's located in an R3A zoning district, and land uses in the surrounding area are primarily residential, characterized by single and two-family detached homes in the surrounding R3A district. The All My Children Daycare 4 child care facility occupies space in the one-story privately owned building, including cellar and rooftop play area. It comprises a total of approximately 27,070 square feet, including 20,600 square feet of interior space and 6,470 square feet of rooftop play area. The building's primary entrance is located on 164th Place, and a secondary egress, which is shown here, is located on the first floor and leads to an at-grade outdoor play area of approximately 5,730 square feet. At this facility, there are no sprinklers in the building. The center serves up to 100 children under a license from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and is operated by a staff of 23 professional, paraprofessional, and support staff. The first floor contains 9 classrooms, an example of which is here, as well as administrative offices and reception, and a commercial-grade kitchen. All space used for daycare programming is located on the first floor, and the cellar space is used for storage for the All My Children Daycare facilities, of which there are several. And as we discussed at review session, cellar space is in need of repair, but the scope of work outlines improvements to the entire building from cellar to roof, and again, the cellar space is not used for programming space for the children. Rooftop play area shown here consists again of approximately 6,500 square feet, and to facilitate the continued operation of this facility, the applicants seek acquisition of this privately owned building. On October 16th, the CPC certified this application. On November 15th, Community Board 12 held a public hearing and again voted to approve this application by a vote of 36 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstaining. And on November 30th, Queensborough President held a public hearing and issued recommendation to approve this application. Thank you.
Questions for Stephen? There being none, this is on for public hearing.
Okay. The 9th item on our agenda, page number 279, is a pre-hearing for a child care center acquisition in Queens Community District 12, and Stephen is presenting this as well.
This will be my last one, I promise. ACS and DCAS this time seek the acquisition of an existing building located at 143rd 04 101st Avenue in the Jamaica neighborhood of Queens Community District 12. This would facilitate the continued operation of another child care center, which ACS and its predecessor agency, the Human Resources Administration, has operated at this location since 1972. A previous application was approved by the CPC in December of 1992 with a term of up to 20 years. That lease expired in June of 2015, and the center has been operating on a month-to-month basis since that time. The project area consists of Block 10021, Lot 1, with frontage on Brisbane Street and 101st Avenue. It's located in an R5 zoning district, and land uses in the surrounding area are primarily residential, with single and two-family detached homes in surrounding R4 and R5 zoning districts. The Concerned Parents of Jamaica Child Care Facility occupies the entire 3-story building, including cellar and rooftop play area. It comprises a total of approximately 26,635 square feet, including 21,308 square feet of interior space and 5,327 square feet of rooftop play area. The facility is equipped with exterior signage and a covered awning, as we can see here, and the building's primary entrance is located on Brisbane Street. There are 3 classrooms on the first floor, as well as a reception area, which is shown here, as well as bathroom facilities, a staff office, and the center serves up to 116 children with a typical classroom shown here, and is operated by a support staff of 38 professional, paraprofessional, and support services. The second floor contains 2 additional classrooms similar to the one I showed you on the first floor, as well as additional staff offices, bathroom facilities, a staff lounge, and a commercial kitchen. The third floor contains 4 classrooms, as well as bathroom facilities, offices, and a small library. The cellar level contains an indoor multi-purpose room and a music room, as well as bathroom facilities and a small staff kitchenette. This facility, due to its large multi-purpose room in the cellar, is equipped with sprinklers in the cellar, but they're not located on the floors above. The rooftop play area contains approximately 5,327 square feet, a fully enclosed play space, and it's in good condition, as you can see here. To facilitate the continued use of this facility, ACS and DCAS seek the acquisition via lease of property containing the Concerned Parents of Jamaica Early Learning Center. And on October 2nd, the CPC certified this application. On November 15th, Community Board 12 held a public hearing and voted to approve the application by a vote of 36 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstaining. And on November 30th, Queensborough President held a public hearing and has recommended approval. Thank you.
Questions? I'll only note the presence of a red door on that
Red door
building, and
duly
how much
noted.
better the whole building looks.
Thank you.
This is on for public hearing. Thank you.
The 10th item on the agenda, page number 315, is a zoning map and zoning text amendments in Queens Community District 1. Joy Chen of the Queens office is here to present.
Hi, good afternoon, Commissioners. Happy New Year. Astoria Boulevard South LLC is applying for a zoning text amendment and a zoning map amendment. The existing site is located on Astoria Boulevard South between 35th Street and 36th Street. It's an existing 2-story, the project site is an existing 2-story commercial building that was built in 1952 and is occupied currently by a dance studio and martial arts studio. And this shows its location on Astoria Boulevard South. This entire frontage of Astoria Boulevard South, block 633, lot number 35 is the project site, and there's 8 other lots that are in the proposed zoning from an R6B district to a C43 district. The existing zoning in this area, there's a lot of commercial overlays both to the east and to the west. And it is 4 blocks away from Astoria Boulevard, the train, the N&W at 31st Street and Astoria Boulevard. It is a wide street with entrance to Grand Central Parkway. And this shows the requested action. So they are proposing to change the zoning from the R6B, which only allows a 2 FAR and residential uses, to a C43 district, which would allow 3.6 under the MIH for residential, 3.4 for commercial use, and 4.8 for community facility use. and also permit commercial uses as of right. This action would facilitate the construction of a new mixed-use building, which would be 7 stories and 75 feet tall. The C43 district allows a building up to a maximum of 115 feet tall, and the ground floor would have 2,800 square feet of commercial use, and they're saying that the existing dance studio would be the expected new tenant for the ground floor of the new building. The new building would also have 2 curb cuts along Astoria Blvd South, and this would permit access to the parking in the basement level and the rear of the building for the residential units. There are proposed 35 total residential units, including 11 affordable units under the MIH program, and it would be a 7-story building. The building would have a street wall frontage along the whole of Astoria Blvd South and be consistent with the existing development trends in the neighborhood. A new 6-story building was just developed a few years ago too along the same block under the R6B zoning, and this shows the 6-story building that was built a few years ago, and this is the proposed new building. In summary, this building would be 35 new units. It would provide new affordable units in an area that is along a wide street that's close to mass transit, and that would also allow for continued use of commercial uses that is very consistent with the trends in this area. The project was certified on September 5th and went to Community Board hearing and review on October 17th, where the Community Board 1 voted to approve the application with the recommendation that the applicant provide more 2-family units, as well as increase the size of the affordable units to accommodate larger families. And on November 9th, the Borough President held her public hearing and recommended to approve the application with the condition that, again, the applicants consider increasing the number of 2-family affordable units for the new building. A 2-bedroom, yeah.
Questions?
Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
Ms. Joy, welcome back. It's been a long time since we've seen you here.
Yeah.
We've missed you. I have a question about the 2010 rezoning and why this block was, which looks like it does have a frontage that's very consistent with the zoning designation they're seeking now.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it changed to R6B? And
Yeah,
is that even relevant to what we're doing here? I mean, the advantage of doing it now is that we get an MIH mapping as well, so not so bad, but it kind of makes you wonder what we thought we were doing in 2010.
Yeah, the thing is, there are some existing residential buildings that are 2 and 3 stories
On the side
along
streets.
the same block, on the side streets, and also on the front. So it might have just been a matter of, they looked more at the residential on that block. And this, the 2-story building kind of fits. It's an existing 2-story commercial building, so it sort of matches the existing.
It looks more R6B than.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That was then, and this is now. Thank you.
And a perfect example of, on many sites, there's not just one appropriate zoning classification. Other questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Delos.
So I'm just noting from the community board's letter as well that they seem to have concerns about option 2, given that the local AMI is lower than option 2. I guess it would be helpful if the applicant can speak to that tomorrow, whether or not they'd be open to option 1 to help address that concern.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this item will go to public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you, Joy.
The 11th item on the agenda, page number 336, is a zoning text amendment, which I want to note is traveling together with 3510 Astoria Boulevard as the, it actually provides the residential equivalent for the proposed zoning that is being proposed there. Kiyoshi Yamazaki of the Zoning Division is here to present. And Frank. Oh, I'm sorry. Frank is presenting. Frank Rashula is scratch.
Playing Kiyoshi for a little bit. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I just wanted to come a little bit earlier before Kiyoshi gives the presentation on our R61 proposal to give a little bit of the background and the reasoning as to why we're proposing this and why we're having this travel with this application. Because it is a little bit complicated and it's a little bit not the normal course of events. So I'm just going to go to this slide, which shows some other sites first. So back in 2016, when we created MIH and we created ZQA, as part of those actions, we created a series of non-contextual residential districts where MIH could be applied. It was R6, R7, and R8. And the idea of those was that over time, we'd been seeing more and more sites that were located next to infrastructure, like actually the Astoria Blvd site, or were just kind of oddly configured. And most inclusionary applications previous to that were contextual districts. And when you looked at sites like this that didn't really have the character of contextual districts or the needs of street walls, you didn't want to have those things be required right next to large rail lines or large highways. That was the idea that, like, if we were going to see more applications like this, we should have zoning tools to address that situation. The intent of those was that they would have singular heights, FARs, and coverage. And while that was true of the R8 version of the R8 district that we created, we realized after everything got approved, after the smoke cleared, that inadvertently we had referred to a chart that had a different FAR and coverage for R6 and R7 districts for wide and narrow streets. That never was the distinction, and the downtown Rockaway site kind of points this out. Where is the wide and narrow street distinction on the site? That's kind of multiple blocks long and kind of configured it also from various different parts of lots. So since then, we have been trying to address the situation through different, the land use actions that have been of the R6 and R7 districts. So for R7, we actually corrected this wide and narrow street distinction through downtown Far Rockaway and Lower Concourse North. We also tried to do this for R6, and we did that for a couple of districts. We tried to propose that through Westchester Mews and downtown Far Rockaway, but through that process, kind of learned some things about it that actually made us realize that the existing condition of this idea that there is a wide and narrow street distinction in R6 may be something worth having. And so what R6.1 does is it creates the version that was originally intended, and then leaves the existing wide, narrow street distinction in the R6 district if and when the council and the commission feel a desire for that's warranted to keep. So that is the reason, and the other thing I think is important is we're trying to do these as soon as we recognize there are issues like that, so that future applications can have the zoning in place that they can aim toward, right? So people know what the applicable zoning tools are, and that's why we actually are took the opportunity to propose this text amendment as part of the Astoria Boulevard project, because it actually was the next R6 project next R6 MIH project that was coming to the commission. We thought that made sense to do it now. So Kiyoshi is going to go into some of the parts of the R6 proposal and the reasons we're creating this as a separate thing, as opposed to just correcting the R6 district.
And if I might just add that in a zoning change as comprehensive as MIH, to have this type of cleanup is to be anticipated. This is highly technical. And I would note that the reason for wanting to fix it now is so that the zoning code becomes more predictable and you don't have to look at the Westchester Mews and at the Astoria and at the downtown Far Rockaway. And so this is an attempt once and for all to codify this into the zoning resolution so that there will be more certainty going forward.
That's right. I'm going to turn it over to Kiyoshi to go through the specifics of the proposal.
Good afternoon, commissioners. What I will go through is mostly like a recap of what Frank just said already, but I will try to add some more to the presentation.
Well, some of us could benefit from hearing it again.
Sure. Yes.
Repetition is okay.
Yes. Thank you. So.
The doors over here.
Yes.
I only think for 10.
Okay, so there you go. the Department of City Planning proposes a zoning tax amendment to establishing on R61 district, which will be a new medium-density non-contextual district. The new district would also become the residential equivalent district for C42 and C43 districts when they are mapped within mandatory inclusion housing. The project was certified on September 5th of last year, and now back to the commission for public hearing tomorrow. So just some of the background, what we've been trying to do for last year or so. In Westchester Mills in Bronx and downtown for Rockaway in Queens, the commission approved tax amendments that gave an uniform 3.6 FAR and 65% lot coverage for all R6 districts mapped within MIH areas, regardless of the wide or narrow street distinction. However, City Council limited the applicability of the CPC approved tax amendments to those specific projects because the council believes that they want to have the option to decide whether the wide and narrow street distinction is appropriate for future applications. Here's the fix we are proposing. So the proposed R61 district, this will create an option within MIH areas if the commission and the council believes that lower FAR and lot coverage are appropriate on narrow street in some rezoning areas where there is an existing context. R6 district can be mapped. And if commission and the council believes that a uniform FAR and lot coverage is appropriate, R61 can be mapped. Okay, going to the next slide. This is just a summary of how similar and different R61 is when compared with an R6 district. So the currently R6 district has a maximum lot coverage and residential FAR. Variable coverage and FAR depends on the site's proximity to a wide and narrow street. 65% along wide street and 60% coverage on narrow street, and 3.6 FAR on wide street and 2.42 FAR on narrow street. Proposed R61 district, which will be a C42 and C43 district equivalent for residential, will have the one consistent lot coverage of 65% and one consistent residential FAR of 3.6 FAR. Other than those two bulk regulations, all the maximum base height, maximum height, permitted uses, and parking regulations will be exactly the same with R6 district. The R61 district would have a uniform bulk regulations regardless of site location on a wide or narrow street, and the new district would fill the gap between R6 and R7 district on narrow street. Currently, R6 on narrow street allows a 2.42 FAR, and it jumps to a 4.6 FAR in R7 district. There's no district in between currently exists today for MIH. The site, the R61 district would also be a residential equivalent for C42 district and the C43 district when they're mapped with MIH, where 3.4 FAR is permitted for commercial uses. Those C4 districts are generally mapped in areas with limited context, as well as the growth is more appropriate. So we believe that the changing the residential equivalent for those C42 and C43 district to be 3.6 is appropriate. Yes, and the second point of this slide is about we need to make this tax fix at the earliest possible opportunities. As Marissa said, if we miss this opportunity, zoning maps are not what they appear to be, and the developer have to go to the zoning text to determine what the permitted density for their specific C43 district or C42 district. And we will also need to create many project-specific options, as is the case with our 6th district today. Zoning text today has the wide, narrow street 3.6 FAR applicability only for Westchester Mews and the Far Rockaway today. We would like to minimize the those exception languages. And once we map a lot of C43, C42 district in the city, we have to refer out to existing MIH areas with C42, C43 when we make this change. So proceeding with this change today with the Astoria Boulevard, which is seeking to rezone to C43 district, is enable us to avoid this future larger effort and confusion in the zoning text. So, yes. So the Community Board 1 of Queens and the Queens Board President both recommended disapproval of this application for the following reasons. The creation of a new district with a city-wide applicability must be referred out to all community boards for comments. The second point was that the proposed amendment has no applicability to 3510 Astoria Boulevard South rezoning. And lastly, the proposed removal of wide and narrow street distinction could have a perceptible impact on an area's built character. On the first point, this is a new district and a new regulation only applicable to future discretionary CPC City Council actions. And we have determined that it is appropriate to refer out only to the community board and borough that is being mapped for the first time. The second point, the proposed amendment has no applicability to 3510 Astoria Boulevard. Well, as I have already stated, Astoria Boulevard is seeking for C43 with MIH, and we would like to minimize the future confusion in the zoning text and map not talking to each other. And in case this 3510 Astoria Boulevard was the district was enlarged in the future in the same neighborhood, we don't want to have like two separate rezonings right next to each other, looking exactly the same on the zoning map, but the zoning text says different things. Also on the last point, the proposed removal of a wide and narrow street distinction could have a perceptible impact on an area's built character. Yes, we agree with that there need to be more sensitive rezoning actions, and this R61 rezoning text change is exactly to address this issue the community board and the borough president raised. The R61 application, R6 district will remain as is today with wide and narrow street distinction, and R61 will add additional option to address these neighborhood character issue. Thank you.
I'll note that I personally wasn't surprised by the community board recommendations, because I know that when this came before the commission at certification, there were questions. It's tremendously wonky and complex. That's why we had asked Frank to give the broader context. But the one thing that I did want to make absolutely clear is that this new text would not apply anywhere unless it were mapped, and it would have to come then before the City Planning Commission. So the concern about having other community boards have an ability to weigh in is something that would happen at the time of any such future mapping. So, questions? Yes, Commissioner Deleuze.
So on that point, so has that happened before? Do we have examples where that's happened before that we can point to, where where we've basically started with the community board, and then we've gone broader once each action happens, to kind of address these concerns directly.
Yeah, I mean, just right now, you're looking at R91 at 425 Grand Concourse is a good example of that, where a zoning district was created and became a new non-contextual MIH district that was only referred out to the community board. We've done that. C44D is another example where it was looking at the conditions applicable at the time around Bushwick, and then the idea became that that became a district that we would do. That's common process for us. Yeah, I mean, I think over time, and good ideas happen in the zoning resolution from time to time, and they get borrowed and used in other places sometimes. But the idea that the place where the creation of the text first starts is where that would then get kind of reviewed is common for us. So that's why when we did this, we tried to do this as part of this application.
If I might, and was that information shared with both Community Board 1 and the Borough President prior to them taking their votes? That way they could perhaps feel a little reassured that precedent wasn't being set?
Yes, the department visited their pre-public hearing as well as public hearing sessions, and in the land use committee session for community board, we spent a good hour explaining, the difference between, the reason why we are traveling with 3510 Astoria Boulevard. And we did the same for the board president public hearing. We went there, we spent a good 30 minutes explaining why we're traveling with 35 Astoria Boulevard and why it is appropriate.
Yes. It's a complicated thing, right? I mean, even in this instance, the R7 fix was seen in Queens through downtown for Rockaway. And so that idea, it was at a single community board and at a single borough. It's kind of, it kind of demonstrates the typicalness of it, of course.
Commissioner Levin. So with this text change, assuming it's approved, the wide street, narrow street distinction will not apply in new C, whatever it is. C42 and C43.
Right.
Whenever we have a new mapping of C42 or C43 with MIH.
That's right.
Then we use the R6. But so if we had a situation where, for other reasons, well, I don't know if there are other reasons, you would be looking at one of those C4 map changes, but everyone decided that the narrow street rules actually made sense there, you would have to flip it to an R61.
Well, I think the thing that we saw, and is today, if you just map the C42 or C43 for commercial FAR, it's already 3.4, right? So, and that's blind to wide or narrow street distinctions. And so the idea of having such a low FAR in a narrow street, if the commission and the council are comfortable with the idea that 3.4 FAR is appropriate on a narrow street for commercial use, it would seem comparably appropriate for a similar FAR to be appropriate on a narrow street for residential use. And so having the two be actually close together was actually just to some degree of benefit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you've persuaded me, and I wasn't persuaded before. Do you think you're going to be able to? But you weren't able to persuade the Queens Community Board nor the borough president. How are things going to run at the council? Do you think they're going to get this?
I mean, I think one of the reason this was created was as to address the point that they raised, which was the idea that there may be situations where, in an R6 context, a desire for a difference between the wide and narrow street FAR may be appropriate. And this is trying to solve the thing that they identified as something that we agreed was like a warranted point here. If you were in the R7 districts, you could always change the zoning map from R7 to R6 and have lower FARs. But if you were in an R6 context and you wanted something lower, you really had nothing if everything was at 3.6. And so this, we think this addresses the issue that they've raised.
Right.
But yeah.
But now you have new council, so who knows?
We will see.
Right.
But I think,
That's not the
sadly,
first time it's been said this year.
but sadly, I think the thing I would say is that, I think if that was to happen, I think we would look to try to figure out a different way to do the same thing, because this idea that the zoning text, as Kiyoshi said, and is really a fair point, is why have an R6 district, but then you have to go crawling into the basement of the zoning text to identify that this one has a different FAR than every other one. That's really a kind of disservice.
Yeah, but it's, this wide street, the way I came in on this was remembering the wide street, narrow street battles we went through with MIH and how important it was for some communities to cling to the differences there. And, at first blush, it looks like, whoa, you're trying to redo something that we spent a lot of time battling over in MIH, and you're slipping it in on one zoning application where it isn't even needed. So what's up with that? I mean, I think you have a good answer to it, but that's the sensitivity here.
Certainly, and I think the interesting thing I think for us is when we proposed this as part of Westchester Muse or Downtown for Rockaway, it didn't raise any concerns because it was just part of the fix, right? It was like people were seeing the kinds of sites that we meant before, and I think the idea is that we're trying to give people that tool that they currently don't really have to actually be able to do these things.
Right, and you're not changing their old tool.
That's right.
You're leaving them both available.
Okay, it will be interesting to see who shows up for this public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, moving on to future votes. On January 3rd, we've prepared reports on 827, 831 Broadway, a landmark designation in Manhattan Community District 2. The LSSNY Center 14 Nasseri Michelin Child Care Center, acquisition in Manhattan Community District 9. A special permit at 350 East 88th Street, Manhattan Community District 8, and a special permit at 172, 174 East 73rd Street, Manhattan Community District 8. Also scheduled for a vote on January 3rd, the West Chelsea Affordable Housing Fund proposed rule. We have John here to discuss. And Annie is here. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Commission. When last we discussed the West Chelsea Affordable Housing Fund, Commissioners Ortiz and Commissioner Levin asked whether the department had made any sort of adjustment to the transaction data before taking the median. We hadn't. While more sophisticated forms of adjustment are beyond the competence of the department, it's relatively straightforward proposition to adjust for inflation. And so in investigatory fashion, we redenominated the value of all transactions into November 2017 dollars and retook the median based on that and came up with a new median slightly above $525 per square foot. And I believe we outlined that in a memo. And so we just wanted to update the commission on that step that we took and see if the commission has any more questions on the Affordable Housing Fund.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Well, I went home and I guess it's when I saw your chart and the proposal to adjust to inflation. It kind of set me thinking, and also looking at the chart where you plotted the data points, and you realize that there's just a sort of an inexorable trend to the upper right on this page. There just something feels intuitively awkward about a formulation that leans so heavily on earlier numbers. And I got to thinking that a CPI adjustment in a Manhattan real estate context really kind of didn't do it, at least for me. So I went and thought about other areas in which we've had to grapple with this, how do you price development rights transfers? And the two that came to mind are 550 Washington, the two Hudson River Park ones, 550 Washington and 675, Block 675 that's now before us, and conveniently I went and looked at those appraisal reports, conveniently both done by the same firm, and they follow a pretty standard pattern. What's Different there is their approach was to appraise fee interests and then make an extrapolation about how you would value development rights. So it's not exactly the same thing. But in both cases, those appraisals only looked at looked for comparable transactions over a 3-year period, not a 5-year period, and had fewer data points than we have here. But more importantly, they included, even for that short a look-back period, a market rate adjustment that in some cases had a period of time where they had to be adjusted by 2.5% per month. And when you see that kind of data about changes in the approach an appraiser would take to changing real estate values in that neighborhood, it really reinforced to me the correctness of trying to have some sort of market rate adjustment here. I fully recognize that as you think about it, it's hard to, I mean, I know we're not looking at a full-blown appraisal here. And I'm not questioning, as the community board did, whether we ought to dig into the realities of each of the data points and try to suss out which of them were arm's length and which weren't. I think on that point, we have to take the Department of Finance numbers. We can't be applying our own judgments to what's behind any of those numbers, and there's good enough reason for them to be solid, correctly, adequately, fairly appropriate, reported numbers to DOF. So that's not my issue. But I do think that our process here should have included some kind of market rate adjustment, and failing, and I can understand the practical reasons for not doing it, because it's a hard thing to figure out how to do. I point out we did figure out how to do it in the market study for the theater development rights, in the theater development rights regime, and that one went back over 15 years. It may be hard to do, but I think it's the right thing to do, and failing to do it shortchanges affordable housing in an area that really needs it, because it's so rapidly changing with market rate housing. So, long speech.
If I could respond, I think you raised legitimate points, and the question is, we don't have a private sector developer here able to go through this. I do think it may be worth postponing the vote, since we are not on a time clock, and going back and seeing whether, talking to some of our sister agencies, if there is a way of getting some handle on it. I can't guarantee it, but I think we all share the sense that we want this underpinned by a rigorous analysis, not just, ooh, the highest number that we can get. But I think you raise very legitimate points, and so give us a chance as a department to go back and see if there is a way that we can come back. I do think the CPI adjustment was one good idea to try and reflect a reality, and if we have tools reasonably available to us, we'll come back again with that analysis.
Okay.
So, Mr. Secretary, if we could take this off of the agenda.
That's, sure.
Thank you.
Also on January 3rd, 172 Nevada Avenue in Staten Island, 66 Arbutus Avenue, and 5403 Arthur Kill Road in Staten Island. On January 17th, also scheduled for a vote are the Samuel H. and Mary T. Booth House landmark and the Stafford Osborne House landmark. For post-hearing follow-ups, we have the Sea Park North rezoning, and Richard Jacobs is here to discuss.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. After the City Planning Commission hearing of December 13th, and also after the complying vote by Community Board 13 on November 1st, Community Board 13 held a full board meeting on December 20th and voted on a new motion by their Land Use Committee, which Land Use Committee actually again recommended approval of the application, but in this case, the full board denied that motion by a vote of 11 in favor, 15 opposed, and 1 abstention. And they attached a letter, which is in your package. Again, we asked them to be specific in their comments and their objections. Other than to say that they didn't realize that this was a ULURP application, that's all that they said. Just to mention, we did, as always, when an application is filed, they are sent a notice of application. When it's certified, they're sent a full package, both electronically and by mail. And other than to say that there's some mix-up at the community board office, because we spoke to them as well, and that there are upwards of some 20 new members on the board, and they've asked us to go out and do zoning 101. We've done a first session with them to discuss with them not only land use rationale and how zoning works, but also what their obligations and responsibilities are versus ours. And again, we're going to continue those sessions with the community board to try to avoid this confusion, I guess, in the future. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yes, Commissioner Deleuze.
It's not so much a question, and I'm sure you're already aware of that the Center for Urban Pedagogy has a lot of materials about what is zoning that is very accessible to the public, that I think, I know the department also has a number of things that are very helpful, but I have found using both DCP's tools and Center for Urban Pedagogy's tools together are very helpful in explaining things to people.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, also for post-hearing follow-up, the Jerome Avenue rezoning, Michael Parkinson is here to present.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year, Commissioners. As Ryan mentioned, I'm here for the Jerome Avenue post-hearing follow-up. This is the second follow-up we've done. We were here last session to discuss a number of items. Today, we'll be focusing on the non-residential uses and commercial uses mapped as part of this application. And as was the case last time, my colleague from HPD, Simon Kowitsky, is here for a follow-up discussion on any housing-related matters that the Commission would like to ask about. So I'll start by talking a little bit about retail in the corridor, the vision for the corridor, and starting with the context in which the project area lies. And I'm doing so through the lens of the north-south commercial corridor. So Jerome Avenue itself, as you'll recall, is an elevated rail corridor. It is a predominantly commercial corridor, although that commercial use is generally reflected as light industrial or heavy commercial uses. That's why you see a lot of the automotive repair, automotive body shops, tire shops, things like that. Through an extensive visioning and public outreach process, which I'm sure I've talked about probably too often on this podium, but we've done extensive work with the community to really identify a vision for the corridor. And where that vision got us was to transform the Jerome Avenue corridor to a mixed-use, vibrant corridor that serves the communities around it and really is a neighborhood-serving, continuous north-south corridor. And the reason I have this existing zoning map up here is just to demonstrate, aside from a handful of patches on University Avenue, really the Southwest Bronx is void of any strong north-south commercial connection other than Jerome Avenue. And as I described previously, the character of the corridor today doesn't really reflect the vision for what it could be in the future. In addition to Jerome Avenue as a commercial spine, it's serving a number of very dense neighborhoods today. Similar densities to Upper Manhattan. Some of the most dense neighborhoods in the city are located, flanking both the west and east sides of Jerome Avenue. And those neighborhoods are growing, and the proposed action will in fact add to the growth of the area as well. I would also mention here that the dense neighborhoods include very strong and growing immigrant populations, of which have their own real commercial footholds in the area and concentrations in the area that serve those local populations that are also growing. So what we're doing through this proposal, and the reason that we're back here talking about it today is there were some questions about it, so we just wanted to make sure to clarify any questions that arose, is we are mapping commercial overlays along the entirety of Jerome Avenue and River Avenue, where the elevated structure exists. And along with those overlays, we are mapping an enhanced commercial district, which would really impose two main things, one being a mandatory non-residential ground floor, and the other being transparency requirements, in addition to some other requirements that exist, including curb cut locations and things like that. I wanted to take a moment to talk about the ground floor. The ground floor along the corridor next to the elevated rail is certainly a unique condition in that you have this piece of elevated infrastructure that runs the length of the corridor. And I know that a number of you have already been out to tour the corridor, and we'll be taking other commissioners out this week, weather cooperating. And I think anyone that's been out there, and those of you who will come, will really start to understand that specific context of Jerome Avenue and why we are pursuing the non-residential ground floors. We believe that this is not an excessive curation of the ground floor, and in fact, could result in a multitude of uses, including office space, local services, community facilities, as well as some lobby components of some buildings. But really, the main goal here is to keep residential units off of that ground floor as they abut the as they abut the elevated train. And I would also note, again, that the commercial corridors in this area are very active. They see very low vacancy rates as compared with citywide averages, even compared to bids. So these are healthy corridors that we believe are going to be active and multi-use into the future. And the regulations that we're mapping here will help to make sure that any development in the near or interim don't preclude the chances for multiple use, flexible use, down the road. In addition to the non-residential ground floor, we are also allowing for, through the A application, second-story commercial uses within mixed buildings. I would note here that these are optional. We already today see second-story commercial uses throughout the corridor. This would make it as of right in mixed buildings as opposed to only being permitted within the ground floor of a mixed building. And I would also take the time here to note that this moment in time is particularly important for the Jerome Avenue corridor in that the investments that are coming in to this neighborhood through this project and through this planning process are significant. And along with other implementation strategies and recommendations in terms of commercial development, already today the city's invested over $1 million in the way of commercial district grants through the Department of Small Business Services, really aimed at bolstering the commercial landscape in the corridor by arming local partners to do things like merchant outreach, shop local ad campaigns, beautification and placemaking. So really, it is our assertion that Jerome Avenue should be a place for people. It should be mixed use and vibrant. And we really, we see the ground floor of these spaces as being important to be multiple uses and flexible into the future. And just sort of to demonstrate some of the results that we would anticipate seeing along Jerome, this is a Montefiore medical office that is on Jerome Avenue today, just north of Burnside Avenue. And I use this photo to demonstrate that this use is certainly something that we would expect to see and would be permitted under the new rules into the future. But instead of having largely inhospitable and sort of blank walls, we would have something more akin to this, which is the Empire State Ambulatory Surgery Center up on Webster Avenue in the Bronx, which is more transparent. I think the uses call for 50% of the surface area along the facades of these uses to be glazed with transparent materials between 2 and 12 feet on that use. Here's another use on Jerome Avenue, which is a supportive housing development. Again, this is the type of use that would be able to remain or would be able to be developed into the future, but could look something closer to this, where you have larger windows, wider transparencies. The difference being, again, the relationship to the street. And by mapping the enhanced commercial districts, making sure that not only eyes to the street are being maximized, but also views into the uses, especially when it comes to commercial uses, will really enhance the quality and character of that street. And I would also mention that these would be prospective rules. So any use that remains or that exists today would not need to retroactively retrofit or change their building, but any building that would seek enlargements or redevelopment would be subject to these rules. So with that, before we move on to the housing follow-up, I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission might have on this issue.
Yes, Vice Chair Knuckles.
Well, Empire State Ambulatory, Is that a commercial facility or a community facility?
There'd be a community facility.
Right.
So community facility uses, office uses, and commercial uses would be permitted along the Jerome Avenue.
Right, okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Ortiz?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you first for the tour that we took last week. I thought that was, or 2 weeks ago, very helpful. Yeah, we've had lots of conversations about retail on the corridor, and I think, it's fair to say that some of the assumptions that we bring to this, I have concerns about. There's a conflation of issues here. The idea that that the density here, because it's comparable to other areas, suggests that there's demand for retail. That's not necessarily the case. We have SBS research that suggests otherwise, that there's a challenging environment for retail. You mentioned that there's low vacancy rate, and it's an active, it's very active. But it's active with, in many cases, automobile uses, which under the new zoning rules would not be in new development. I don't think it's quite fair to suggest that, the density will support a vibrant retail environment, or that because there's low vacancy, at this moment, we're not going to see more vacancy with, more ground floor retail. So I have concerns about that, and I just will state that, we're looking at, under the with action scenario, over 550,000 square feet of retail projected. And you also mentioned 2,000 new residents. That sort of new development is going to create more demand. That's what in the EIS. 2,000 new residents will support between 10 to 30,000 square feet of additional retail. So I'm just, all of this sort of goes to this much bigger issue of why, we're facing an environment where this is a challenging retail environment. Automobile uses have filled in the nooks and crannies and found demand for their services. And the data we have doesn't necessarily suggest that we're going to see demand for all the retail that we're now going to be requiring on the ground floor. I understand that there are other uses, office, community services, that can fill these spaces, and I think that's fine. But I wonder why we're not looking at the Pratt recommendation, that we carve out perhaps a little bit more, maybe not their whole recommendation, but a little bit more to allow for some of the automobile uses to remain, which also provide jobs and would keep us from over-retailing this strip.
Sure, thank you. I would just point out two things. One, as I mentioned, this would be prospective. So any existing use would be, obviously grandfathered in and could remain in perpetuity.
But could not grow.
Could not grow, that is true. And the other thing is, I don't know if there is an error in the EIS in terms of what type of, there would be over 4,000 units of housing projected, which would result in over 12,000 new residents. So we do expect substantial growth over time. This is also a 2-mile corridor. So there is, the length of the entire corridor to consider as well. But your points are good.
I would also make a number of observations. One is that I think we have used as shorthand automobile uses. There actually are quite a different types of automobile uses. Some of them are retail. They're tire stores, and those will remain as permitted uses. It is the industrial uses that would be rendered as legal non-conforming uses. I think the second is, if we go back to the basic principle of what we were looking to do as one of the touchstones, part of why the 2 community boards and then 3 community boards asked us to look at Jerome, it was to establish this avenue as a continuous retail corridor. One of the major concerns that we have with the Pratt study is the suggestion that we would take the powerful linear corridor and interrupt it with industrial areas. Also, we looked at the additional areas that Pratt had suggested, and they would protect an additional 5 auto uses at the loss of many, many units of affordable housing. And so it isn't that this is an exact science of how many feet of retail or community use, but rather the vision that we're headed for. I do know from my meetings with leaders in the Bronx that the Bronx prides itself on being a center of medical employment, and that a number of the medical institutions have cheered us for allowing for community facility uses, which they view as an opportunity to bring their facilities from their major hospital centers and bring it out closer to the community. And I guess the final observation that I would make is we have seen in a number of developments that when affordable housing developments with retail on the first floor, that in the early years, there are challenges when the project is first up and running. That may be the case here. One of the differences is that, though, I think, is that some of the affordable housing developments that have had empty retail are in more frontier neighborhoods where they are the first new development that has been here, whereas Jerome Avenue is along public transit and is already as Michael has said, a thriving retail corridor. And so that is why the department continues to believe that this requirement that the first floor be a multitude of different uses but not residential is the appropriate way to go. Yes, Commissioner Marin.
Good afternoon. I also attended the site tour with Commissioner Ortiz, and I did also make a couple of observations. One is that there is a proliferation of a lot of automobile-related uses, and there is no, how do I say it? There's no visual impact to the community or the corridor because of the way that they're set up. So there are a lot of times when their services are out into the sidewalk, you have to walk around them. It's a little bit uncomfortable in certain nodes of the Jerome corridor because of the fact that at some point it's wider than at the certain nodes where it's narrower. What we also did experience was that there were some residential buildings right on the avenue, some of which gave their back to the avenue, so you didn't know what they were. One of them is the Courtyard Hotel that was developed as a hotel, which now serves as a women's shelter. And there was another building further up, I'm gonna say about 183rd Street, which really lends itself sort of to me as a model of what we should try also to experiment with, is setting the building back. And this building is completely residential. There are trees lining the sidewalk before the residential, and there is residential uses. There are residential uses on the first floor, which sort of suggests that maybe some first floor residential use would be acceptable here in this corridor. What I do have to say is that, I also noticed that there were many small shops, barbershops, markets, catering to the West African community, Dominican community, and some Muslim community, very tiny. So we passed a barbershop that was a 2-seater barbershop, probably 100 square feet, which I'm sure if had the opportunity to grow would do so. We passed by many African markets where the spaces were cramped. They were also screaming, it seems to me, for more retail on the first floor. So and having visited and living in the Bronx all my life and seeing the corridor of Jerome, Gun Hill, where there are retail fronting onto the avenue where the subway exists, elevated subway exists, the commercial does provide that buffer between residential uses and the street itself where all the activity is happening. These streets, this Jerome corridor also, in my opinion, requires more lighting. If this commercial is to be effective, we need more lighting. There's not enough lighting on the street. As a matter of fact, it started getting dark, and you really couldn't see far in front of you because of the situation. The L train, there's no lighting. There's not sufficient lighting underneath the L train. So there are challenges to the avenue, but I think that there's a way of resolving them all. Maybe the response is that we take a look again at some of the setbacks or some of the building configurations or where we think there are narrower streets, like on the 187th Street area, where that residential building was set back, and it did lend itself well to the avenue. In terms of the automobile uses, we started out at 167th Street, where we had a huge tire repair or whatever it was, automobile use right next to the police precinct. They were very organized. They were very clean. Their frontage is on a wider street with no train in front of it, so it's not as obtrusive as are the other smaller shops. I just think that the commercial here up the avenue makes a lot of sense. I just think there's a couple of nuances we need to take a look at in between. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
You know, if I could just say, I recognize the desire to see, you know, an active corridor. You know, but we've been seeing trends in sort of the shrinking of retail footage. We know that in environments like this, we don't often get the business that we want just because we say we want it. And I do sort of see it as a responsibility of ours to infuse some sort of market reality, you know, an overlay, a market overlay, not a zoning overlay, onto this. And, you know, I recognize this is not where this is going, but I just think it's important sometimes to push back and to communicate that, you know, seeing retail from beginning to end is highly unlikely. So how can we create an environment where we're supporting the retail that's there, you know, and not necessarily undermine it, which is what I fear with this. But, you know, we can agree to disagree on that.
Understood. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Deleuze.
I'm not going to wade into, you know, the details of the street by street in terms of what the commercial overlay should be. But I would just offer this, that to the extent that new development, that HPD is involved in any underwriting of new development, that the assumptions that HPD encourages the developer to have about what commercial rents are, which then often contributes to whether or not a space is filled or not, or how quickly a space gets filled, is probably pretty critical, especially in this case. So I would really encourage HPD to, if it's the city's desire to create active commercial spaces along Jerome Avenue, then I think that the city's underwriting and should help reflect that, and understanding that it may take a couple of years for it to take hold, and to encourage the smaller spaces that are catering more to the local community.
I'm quite glad that our colleague Simon from HPD is here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why don't
Well,
we move on to the housing? That's
Yeah,
a
that
perfect
seems like as
segue.
good a segue as any.
Good afternoon, commissioners. That's a good point about the commercial underwriting on our buildings. You know, we've been trying to have much tighter coordination with SBS, especially around the Neighborhood 360 program. So want to make sure that our developers know to use the Neighborhood 360 partner as a partner that they can consult to find the right and appropriate mix of ground floor retail in our buildings. I'm here today mostly just to follow up on a few things, and I can take some questions as well. A couple follow-up items from our when we met last a couple weeks ago. There was a question about the owner outreach that we've done to date, and to what extent that's actually led to us closing any deals. So I went back and looked at some of the data. So we, you know, we've made contact with owners through a variety of different means. We've done mass mailers that reach tens of thousands of different owners and properties. We've hosted a series of different events in the community to let property owners know about the different resources we provide. So far, those efforts have resulted in us making additional further contact with about 34 owners in and around the Jerome area. Nothing has made it into our loan pipeline thus far, but we know from our experience that it can often take over a year and many follow-up contact and outreach to actually move from pre-pipeline to pipeline. So we started this outreach in October last year, 2016 actually. So, you know, we're hopeful that as we move forward, we can move some more of those properties into our pipeline. We also, as you know, I mentioned our new Landlord Ambassadors program. Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition is the contractor on that, and as they start to implement their outreach strategy this year, we can drum up some more leads as well. But overall, feel pretty confident about the number of properties and homes that we have in our preservation pipeline. Another reminder, I went through the details of it at our last meeting, but I can take any questions if you would like about the certification of no harassment program that was adopted and that would be applied here. Just a quick recap that owners of buildings where we find reason to believe that harassment may have occurred will have to submit to an investigation by HPD if they seek to obtain a demolition, a building permit for demolition or major alterations to their building. And if HPD finds that harassment has occurred within the last 5 years, would require, as a remedy, the owner to set aside permanent affordable housing in any new development. We went over also a new piece of legislation that was adopted, the Predatory Equity Bill, also known as a speculation watch list. That will require, through city council legislation, HPD to publish every quarter a list of properties that we feel tenants could be vulnerable to harassment because the owner, the purchaser, has paid more than what one might reasonably expect for a property generating a set amount of income. We circulated to the commission the legislation itself as well as a brief summary, and I hope you received it, and if there are any other questions, I can take them. There was a specific question about how we estimate NOI, and that was based on, after looking at it closer and getting a briefing from my team, based on the notice of property value that's in the DOF. It's a publicly accessible DOF, notice of property value, and they actually estimate the revenue and expenses that property generates and incurs. So we use that information with a set of assumptions about operating costs to understand the value of the property. Yeah. Last but not least, we circulated this map of rent-stabilized and rent-regulated properties in the rezoning area that you have, and we can follow up on that if needed. There's also been a lot of talk about preferential rents and how that could impact the vulnerability of the housing stock in this area. So we also circulated with you, and you should have in your packets a flyer that was created. We're trying to really promote and get out as many ways as we can, just kind of demystifying what a preferential rent is, what it means, and at the bottom there's an email address and phone numbers that tenants can call to get help if they need to.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Some weeks ago, I saw the mayor and HPD announced a strategy around targeted acquisition of multifamily buildings. I think that was in the context of an anti-homeless strategy, yeah. But I'm just wondering, is any of that impacting the Jerome Avenue corridor?
That's a good question. I don't think we've actually identified which properties could be subject to that new initiative, but I can follow up and see what I can share with the commission.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marin.
Simon, good afternoon. Were you able to find out, I know this is circles around the harassment issue. Oh, yeah. Were you able to find out about the DHCR vacancy and the apartment going to market? Because that's a form of harassment, but not really, but it could be seen as harassment where you leave an apartment empty to go to the market rent. Right. Thanks for reminding me. Was this the question about does DHCR actually track when a unit becomes vacant and whether they can kind of take a proactive step? Well, not when they track, because I'm sure they track it. My concern, moreover, is if you hold an apartment empty for a certain period of time, that time frame is what's important, because we're talking about anti-harassment. And while, leaving an apartment empty may not be harassment, let's just say somebody dies in the apartment and there's no heirs or there's nobody else on the lease, you can leave that apartment empty for X period of time. My belief is that it's 2 years. That's the last I remember from DHCR. But my point is that someone can hold that apartment empty for 2 years to bring it to market, make the necessary renovations when other apartments aren't being renovated. So the concern of harassment becomes even more as a result of the DHCR regulations around vacancy adjustments. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely been a tactic that we've seen in different parts of the city, absolutely, where landlords will use different tactics, whether harassment or just the fact of not putting a unit back on the market to actually empty it out so that they can make those alterations, right? I think that one important new tool that we have is the Certificate of No Harassment legislation that would actually allow us to go back and investigate whether harassment has occurred and hold the owner accountable to that. The other is that
I think it's important for us and for community residents and community groups to flag those instances for us as quickly as possible. You know, when they feel that an owner is emptying out a building through whatever tactics it may be, it's really important for us to go in early and identify the problem.
They may not necessarily be emptying out a building. Somebody, I mean, I'm using the most extreme. Somebody dies, because
Yeah.
that's the only one I can think of that's really the extreme. And you leave, there's no harassment there. Somebody died.
Yeah.
And you can say, you know, if the rule of thumb is 2 years, of the law is 2 years with the HCR, you can say I was making repairs, the apartment wasn't ready. I'll use every excuse under the sun. Legally, somebody died. So there's no harassment there.
Yeah.
But then the apartment goes to market, and that's the concern that I think the community has been voicing, not as well as I put it, because they are just pointing at, you're harassing me, which is part of the problem.
Yeah.
So the concern really becomes is, I mean, a landlord is following DHCR regulations, holds the apartment, and then we lose an affordable unit.
Yeah, so I don't know if the unit actually would be able to go to market as soon as, you know, after the 2-year point, right? They have to be doing other things in their filings and making improvements, and they can take that vacancy increase. Once it surpasses the $2,700 threshold, then it can become deregulated. But I think that's just a fact of the law, you know, the state's rent stabilization laws. And unfortunately, it's not, you know, always working in our favor. But again, if this is something that's systematic, or if there's suspicion of foul play or fraud that's being committed by the property owner, those are really important for us to know about, and we can actually investigate and hold them to account for that.
Commissioner Deloze.
Simon, sorry I wasn't here last time when you presented. But I'm wondering, you know, going back to the hearing and then the map that you have in your hands about the rent stabilized units, have you looked at that compared to ANHD's data about the number of rent stabilized apartments that have been lost in the immediate area to be rezoned compared to the areas adjacent to the rezoning area? To me, that like becomes this fabulous matrix for the certificate of no harassment outreach. And, you know, the ANHD data was very clear about, you know, especially in the last 2 years, i.e. since the rezoning was announced, that the number of units lost is higher than in the previous years, which to me suggests the possibility of harassment. And it would be helpful, I think, to strategize, again, going back to the new certificate of no harassment program, and about, you know, which of those are privately owned by for-profits versus nonprofits, to help zero in on who's most at risk as quickly as possible. I think that would be helpful.
I haven't had the chance to do like a detailed dive into the NHD analysis, but that's something that we can look to for the next session.
I think it would be helpful.
We did share the list of rent-stabilized buildings that we believe to be rent-stabilized or have a rent-stabilized unit in and around the rezoning area to the tenant support unit, and so they've been going out and canvassing, but, you know, we should think about other ways that we can beef up those
And
efforts.
has the tenant support unit been in contact with the tenant organizers on the ground as well, like on a very consistent basis?
I can't speak for them in terms of how regular they keep in touch, but I'm sure they do coordinate. I know that they do. I can follow up and find out.
It'd be helpful to know, too, now that the legislation has passed, like how quickly those neighborhood contracts are going to be put in place to help fund the outreach.
Yeah. Okay, will do.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
All this discussion of the certificate of no harassment program kind of begs the question: what is HPD expanding its workforce in that area? It's a big job and a complicated job to enforce the certificate of no harassment. And these investigations are complicated and very detailed oriented, and it seems like it's a great thing and an important thing, and we have to be on it. But HPD is going to need an army to make it happen. Are you going to get the army?
So I think that part of what Commissioner Luz was referring to was that the pilot does expect to include funding for community-based organizations to actually help us do the investigations. So that'll be immensely helpful. One of the reasons I think we limited it to a pilot as well was so that we can actually see what level of resources it would require. But yes, there are additional staff and resources being dedicated to it.
Good.
If I might, one last
Yes,
thing.
Commissioner Deleuze.
I think I asked this question before, but I don't know if you have the answer yet. Do you know what kind of campaign the city is contemplating to announce to the world, in particular to brokers and those types, about the existence of the Certificate of No Harassment Program? The number of setup
Yeah.
sheets that I get emailed to me on a daily basis is amazing. So I think getting the word out about this will help stem the tide. And I think, some people are going to get, buy a property where harassment has happened, not realizing that they may get in trouble
Yeah.
for past actors.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're starting to gear up now to organize an event. Maybe it could turn into a series of events that we're doing with Councilmember Gibson. We want to really make sure that everyone understands what the zoning will do to their property and what resources are available either to help them as a commercial tenant or business owner or someone looking to redevelop the property, and what financing is available, what the city will actually pay you to compensate you for acquisition costs. And CONH, I think, is really important as well to be lumped into that conversation, to say, like, these are all the things that are at stake and that are going to impact your ability to redevelop or use your property.
Perhaps co-hosting that with the local chamber and REBNY and the
Yeah.
brokers associations would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, thank you again, Simon, for being a frequent visitor to our review sessions.
Thank you for having me.
And I think that is all the business that we have, Ryan?
Yes,
And
yes.
so we'll end this session by we'll see each other again tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.